Knowing the needs of your end users for better SharePoint adoption. Achieving SharePoint adoption starts with understanding the daily working habits of your end users. Know the workflows they follow, the tools they use, the devices they use, who they work with, and more. In this short video, Curtis Hughes, CIO at Midrex Technologies, shares steps you can follow. To watch the complete 1-hour course on 5 proven steps to improve SharePoint adoption, click the link below to go to visualsp.com.
So this is another one of those that a lot of people say is obvious or should be obvious. But again, I wouldn't put it in this deck as one of 5 steps, right? If it weren't important. And I know this is a big bucket, right? Put people first. Well, that's huge. What does that mean? That's very vague. But that's why you're here, right? To get people to use this better. But somewhere along the way, and I say this all the time, somewhere along the way with these tools, we lost sight of why we're doing them, I think, and I love collaboration tools, but I think somewhere along the way we kind of became, enamored with and had this love affair with technology and all this great new shiny technology. And then we forgot to really keep our people at the center of everything we're doing. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? That's who's using it. And so one of the things you guys have to realize is that implementing SharePoint and building an awesome intranet that is super branded and has all these great bells and whistles and is integrated and all these things is awesome. But if no one uses it, or they don't want to use it, or they go around it and do something else, it's pointless. It has no value whatsoever, and the return on investment for that is 0, right? I mean, if no one's using it, then your tool is worthless. So the key is not only just building it, but making sure we're building it specific to how people need to use it. And to do that, you've got to put people first. You've got to start with people and put them really, literally at the center of everything you're doing. And so when I ask a lot of audiences, how well do you know your users? And most of them are like, yeah, we know our users pretty well. I know exactly what they need. And then I start asking a few more probing questions like, how many of you can tell me how, the percentage of millennials in your organization? And then they kind of look at me with a blank stare and they say, okay, maybe that wasn't fair. How many of your users, what percentage use their mobile device to check email or the intranet versus sitting at a desktop? Well, no, more blank stares. And so there's hundreds of these kind of questions that I think we look at the surface, but if we were to just get a little bit deeper, understanding really how our users work, what frustrates them, how do they actually work day to day? I give you a good example. I read a study in the last couple of weeks that actually came out and said that on average, an employee, when they're in the office, actually in the office, is only at their desk 50 to 60% of the time. So that's pretty amazing to me, but we don't think like that. We think that if they're in the office, they're sitting at their desktop, but we're running around from meeting to meeting, looking at our phone, trying to get things in the car, whatever it may be, right? And so we've got to understand how our people are working, and not every group's going to work that way. Engineering and the guys at the plant, they're there probably, right? But maybe your executives or whoever it is, they're out somewhere else. You've got to understand who is our audience and how are we going to do these things. So making sure we put people first, we're delivering immediate value. That's one of the big things that drives adoption, making sure we give them something. A lot of people call it kind of the low-hanging fruit. But again, making it easy, reducing friction. I'll talk about that later on. So part of what we have to spend a lot of time doing as an organization, and what you guys will have to do if you're part of the steering team or the leadership team to try to drive SharePoint and the success of SharePoint, is to actually start shifting your thinking away from what technology, and is that groups versus planner versus Yammer versus this or that, right? I mean, a lot of times we're focusing on what technologies we need to implement, and is that a web part, or is that a workflow, or is that Nintex? I mean, all these things we can throw out. We need to better understand our users, how they're working, who they work with, what their needs really are. And there's a great Gartner study out there that talks all about putting technology at the center and how that leads to success. They actually have it as high as 80% failure rate if you start and lead with technology. So I'll show you what we actually found from some of this. So what we actually found was that conventional wisdom kind of flows like this. So I break things up into this triangle of people, process, and technology, right? That's about how we spend our time on these different projects at a high level, right? And conventional wisdom, and typically what we saw in general, was about 25% on people. Yeah, we got to gather some requirements, and we know we got to do some of those things. About 25% on the process and managing the process, and we know we have to do a project plan. And then about 50% on what are we building, how are we building it, the configuration, going back and forth with developers, is that custom, all these pieces, right? But this was the mixture, if you will, of the 60% that were coming to us struggling. So we said, well, maybe this isn't working so well. What should we do differently? So this is actually where we came up with what we're now calling the 40-20-40 principle. And you guys may have seen something similar. This is the mixture we use. And so today we actually run our projects for the most part. About 40% of the time we spend on people, about 40% on the process, and about 20% on the actual technology and implementation. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I could probably spend an hour alone just on this makeup and how we do this and why we do it. But think of it like building a house, right? And before you can build a house, there's a lot of work that goes into one, just architecting, right? Building out the blueprint, the architect building it out. I mean, that takes months probably to engineer it. And then you got to figure out where you're building it. Will the lot be the right lot? All these kind of things, right? And then someone takes these blueprints, goes out with a team and builds it in a couple weeks. I mean, they build a house really that quick once they have the groundwork. And that's the same thing here. Honestly, the technology is some of the easier parts. I mean, Microsoft's given us a lot of great tools, but a lot of the legwork needs to go 70 to 80% in the people and the process. How are we going to manage it? The governance around that? How are we going to get people to adopt it? Are we really focusing on them? And what I always like to tell people with this is that this isn't 120 or 150%. The ratio and the makeup of this is still 100%. We're just shifting how we're actually spending our time. And one nice kind of bonus from this is that our projects have actually finished under budget more often and faster because we're not having to rework and go back and people don't like it and we have better adoption. I mean, the list goes on and on and on because we're spending more time up front. So instead of a month spending time with people and then, 6 months building it, we spend 3, 4, 5 months with people and the process and making sure we have all that in a row, and then we go build it in a month or two. And maybe sometimes it takes longer to build it, but I can guarantee you have less going back, fixing, less trying to fix, bad impressions and things that didn't work for the first time and that didn't work like people work whenever you have this different mixture. So hopefully this is one thing you guys can take away. I know it won't be perfect. Not everyone's going to be in this 80-20 mixture. But just use this as kind of a checklist. Are we spending 70 to 80% of our time on people and process and about 20 to 30 on technology, or is it the other way around? And that'll tell you kind of, hey, we might need to adjust that. And so I love this kind of thing that I came up with, and it really is the heart of this entire thing. If it's user-centered and if you put users at the center of this, it'll always be user-supported. There's no reason why people won't use it, and many of the reasons why they don't is because it really wasn't focused around knowing how they really work. IT or whoever led this said that, oh yeah, we know exactly what we need to do, and the user said, that's not how I work. If they would have sat with me for a day and just shadowed me or looked over my shoulder, they would have realized I don't work like that at all. That's maybe 1% of the time, and 99% of the time I work totally differently. Understanding those things, and I guarantee it'll always be user supported.
If you would like to automate training and support for your team, install Visual SP, the plug-and-play, instant, and context-sensitive self-help system for SharePoint and Office 365 end users. Over 2 million users and over 200 companies are using Visual SP to boost end-user adoption and reduce the burden on their IT support teams. Using Visual SP's step-by-step intuitive guidance tools, let your colleagues get access to help wherever and whenever they need it, facilitate employee onboarding with always accessible tip sheets, annotated screenshots, step-by-step walkthroughs, and screen capture videos. Accelerate user adoption of your business workflows and improve productivity. To request a free demo and see how Visual SP works, click the link below to go to visualsp.com.